Picture a street so quiet you can hear your own footsteps. The shops are open. There is bread in the oven, round loaves, scored into neat wedges, baked for people who will never come to buy them. On the wall beside you, someone has scratched a joke, an insult, a lover's name, and it is still there, still waiting for a reply that will never come. A dog lies curled beside a doorway, and over all of it hangs a gray, powdery silence, as if the whole town simply stopped breathing between one moment and the next. 2,000 years ago, an ordinary Roman town went about an ordinary day. By the next morning, it was gone, swallowed whole by a mountain. And here is the strange, almost unbearable truth at the heart of this story. The very disaster that killed this city is the only reason we can still walk its streets today. Because when the ash came down, it did not just bury a town, it froze one. It caught an entire world in the middle of a single afternoon and kept it exactly as it was for 2,000 years. This is the last day of Pompeii, and it is the closest any of us will ever come to walking into the ancient world and finding it still warm. To understand what was lost, you first have to see it alive. So forget the marble Rome of emperors and temples. This was a working town on the bay, noisy, crowded, and gloriously ordinary. Somewhere around 12,000 people lived here, give or take. The exact number we can only estimate. And their days looked a great deal like ours. In the bakeries, bakers slid flat, round loaves into stone ovens. The same shape of bread scored into 8 neat wedges that Italians still tear apart today. On nearly every corner stood a kind of ancient fast food counter. Archaeologists have found around 80 of them, where you could buy a bowl of something hot without ever cooking at home. One, uncovered only a few years ago, still had its painted menu on the front and the residue of the very last meals in its jars. And the walls would not stop talking. Thousands of scratches and painted notices still cover them. Prices, election slogans, declarations of love, and insults crude enough to make you laugh out loud. A city of bakers and shopkeepers and bored teenagers, all leaving their mark. This is the world that is about to vanish. Hold on to how ordinary it is, because that ordinariness, that perfectly unremarkable afternoon, is the whole miracle of this story. But how do we know any of this happened at all? How do we know what that day felt like, the sound of it, the terror of it? Because one person wrote it down. Across the bay, about 30 kilometers away, in a town called Misenum, there lived a boy of 17. His name was Pliny the Younger, and on that day he watched the whole thing unfold from a safe distance. Years later, about 25 years later, he described what he had seen in 2 long letters to a Roman historian named Tacitus. And those 2 letters are extraordinary. They are the only eyewitness account of the eruption that survives from the entire ancient world. Everything else is ash and inference and careful science. This alone is a voice speaking from inside the day. And we should be honest about what it is. A memory, written by a grown man about something he had seen as a frightened boy, a quarter of a century before. But it is all we have, and it is remarkable. Even the date reaches us through him, and even that is uncertain. For centuries, people said it happened in late August, in the year we call 79. But carbonized autumn fruit, heavy clothing, and heating braziers lit against a chill now lead many scholars toward the autumn instead, perhaps late October. The exact day is still argued to this moment. Whatever the day, the hour, we can almost fix. It was early afternoon. And then the mountain that everyone had simply assumed was a mountain, green, farmed, harmless, tore itself open. Pliny, watching from across the water, reached for the only thing he could compare it to. The cloud, he wrote, rose like an enormous pine tree, a tall trunk of ash climbing into the sky, then spreading out at the very top into branches. That column of ash and rock punched perhaps 30 kilometers straight up, releasing an almost unimaginable force. This is the phase geologists still name in his honor, the Plinian eruption. And for something like 18 hours, it did not stop. A steady, relentless rain of pumice and ash fell on the town below. It piled in the streets. It buried the doorways. It gathered on the rooftops until, one by one, the roofs began to groan and cave in beneath the weight. Some people fled out into the strange, choking darkness, soft pillows tied over their heads to fend off the falling stone. Others sheltered indoors and waited for it to pass, certain that it must surely soon pass. The town was not being destroyed in an instant. It was being buried alive, slowly, hour after hour, under a sky that was raining stone. Now a second man steps into the story, and you must not confuse the two. The teenager watching from safety had an uncle who shared his name. We call him Pliny the Elder. He was one of the most famous minds in all of Rome, the author of a vast encyclopedia of the natural world, and in that very year, the admiral in command of the imperial fleet stationed right there on the bay. When the older Pliny saw that terrible cloud, he did not do what instinct demands. He did not flee it. He ordered his warships launched straight toward the volcano to try to rescue the people trapped along the shore beneath it. He sailed into the falling ash toward a town called Stabiae, and there, somewhere in the smoke and the fumes, he died. We owe even this to his nephew's letter, and the honest truth is that we do not know exactly how the end came. Overcome by fumes, perhaps, or a weak heart giving way under the strain. But the shape of it is unforgettable. A man who had spent his entire life trying to catalog and understand the natural world was killed by one of its most violent acts, sailing directly toward it to save people he had never met. For all its terror, the falling ash was not the true killer. That came with the dawn. Sometime in the early morning of the second day, the towering column could no longer hold its own weight, and it collapsed. And what came next is the deadliest thing a volcano can do. Not lava, there was no slow river of fire here, but pyroclastic surges, avalanches of superheated gas and ash racing down the mountainside at the speed of a storm, at temperatures somewhere around 200 to 300 degrees. When the first of these reached Pompeii, death came in less than a single second. Closer to the mountain, the seaside town of Herculaneum had already been struck. There, around 300 people had fled down to stone boathouses by the shore, huddled together in the dark, waiting for rescue boats that would never arrive. The surge found them there. We will leave them in that quiet, as people sheltering together, holding on, not as spectacle. And by the time the mountain at last fell silent, 2 whole towns had vanished beneath meters of ash and stone, as though they had never stood there at all. And this is where the whole story turns, because the ash that ended these towns did something no one ever intended. It preserved them. Everywhere else in the ancient world, time quietly erased ordinary life. Cities were rebuilt, stones were carried off, and the everyday was swept away by the next everyday. But Pompeii was sealed shut in an afternoon and left untouched. So when archaeologists finally dug it back out, they did not just find ruins, they found the day itself. In the bakeries, they found the bread still sitting in the ovens, around 81 loaves of it, charred black but perfectly shaped, baked for a lunch that no one ever ate. They found painted menus and wine counters and mosaics still on the floors. One famous doorway still warns, in pictures, to beware of the dog. And Herculaneum, buried far deeper and struck by hotter flows, gave up something even stranger. There, the intense heat did not rot the wood and cloth. It charred them, turned them to solid carbon, and by burning them, preserved them. Wooden doors, furniture, actual food, and inside one grand villa, an entire library. Around 1,800 rolled papyrus scrolls, blackened into lumps of charcoal. It is the only library from the whole of the ancient world to survive. We did not simply uncover 2 ruined cities. We uncovered an ordinary day, kept exactly as it was left. But the most haunting thing the ash kept was not bread or scrolls. It was people. As the excavators dug down through the hardened ash, they kept finding strange hollow spaces, empty cavities in the rock, shaped like something that was no longer there. And in 1863, a man named Giuseppe Fiorelli finally understood what they were. As the victims of the eruption had lain buried, their bodies had slowly decayed away, leaving behind a perfect body-shaped mold in the ash around them. So Fiorelli did something ingenious and very gentle. He poured liquid plaster into those empty spaces, let it harden, and carefully lifted the ash away. And the last moment came back. Not the bodies themselves, those were long gone, but the exact shape of them, casts of the empty spaces they had left behind. A person shielding their face, a family drawn close together, a dog still on its chain. More than 100 of these casts exist now, and today they are treated not as grim curiosities, but as what they truly are, a memorial. Because this is the closest history ever lets us come to a stranger who died 2,000 years ago. Not a name, not a statue, a gesture, the last human shape of a single frightened moment held forever in the ash. For 1,600 years, all of this lay forgotten beneath the fields, until diggers in the 1700s struck the buried streets almost by accident, and the towns began slowly to return to the light. And in a way, they have never once stopped speaking. Because Pompeii and Herculaneum are still giving up their secrets right now. Remember those blackened scrolls, the only library left to us from the ancient world, too fragile to unroll without crumbling to dust? For centuries, they were completely unreadable. And then, in 2023, using powerful scanning and artificial intelligence, researchers read the very first word ever recovered from a sealed, unopened scroll. Out of 2,000 years of darkness, one word came back. In Greek, it was porphyros. It means purple. And as of this year, whole passages of long-lost philosophy are being read again, line by line, for the first time since the mountain fell. Think for a moment about what that means. The disaster that ended a city gave us the most complete memory of the ancient world we will ever hold. The single place where ordinary life was kept exactly as it was lived. Next time, we will follow another great library, the most famous the world ever built, and the true mystery of how it really disappeared. But that is a story for another day. The Codex closes until the next story is written.